the best practice guidelines on the cards on the table, these measures are in place to protect the health and safety of all participants. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. And I will continue. Regulation of recreational boating on Canada's waterways is our topic for today, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 of the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, September 18th, 223. The committee is now resuming its study of the regulation of recreational boating on Canada's waterways. All witnesses have completed the required connection tests in advance of this meeting. I would now like to welcome our witnesses.
Of navigation, we've got Denise Cloutier, and we've got André-Philippe Hébert, and we've got the Fédération Québécoise de défense des lacs et cours d'eau, Constance Ramissier. Je m'excuse pour les prononciations.
I apologize for my pronunciation.
So we'll begin with sorry. Oh, and the deux heures as well. Oui. As well as je m'excuse. As aussi.
Sorry. Yes. And we will also be hearing from the Association des Riverains et Amis du Richelieu, Mr. Renaud Collard.
Clerks, help me out here. First time here. So make sure that you keep your earpieces away from the microphones, as that can cause feedback, which can cause significant damage to our interpreters there. So we will begin with each of you having each group, one person speaking for each group, speaking for 5 minutes. I will stop you once you get to about 5 minutes and 15 seconds, just so we can make sure that we have the entire time. And I'd like to thank all the witnesses for appearing today, as well as our interpreter, our analysts, and our clerk. All the best of the best here at the House of Commons here. Thanks very much. And we will start with the Coalition Navigation. For 5 minutes, please.
Bonjour, merci de nous recevoir. Mon nom est Denise.
Hello, and thank you for having us. I am Denise Cloutier, and I am Vice President of the Coalition Navigation. I have with us our Director, André-Philippe Hébert. Our coalition for responsible and sustainable navigation, that we call the Coalition Navigation, is a pan-Canadian nonprofit organization whose mission is to ensure that legislation on the use of motorboats protects water ecosystems and waterways of Canada. Since 2013, our organization has developed and submitted legislative proposals to the federal government based on scientific facts in order to regulate the use of motorized boats on Canada's waters. Our objectives are to ensure that legislation is science-based and ensures the protection of the quality of our bodies of water. We also want to ensure funding of studies to fill the knowledge gap. Today, we know that there are impacts of navigation on bodies of water, considerable impacts on drinking water intakes. For example, we know that much of Canada's waters are used for drinking waters. We see impacts on aquatic fauna and flora, the introduction of invasive alien species, the deterioration of water quality, lakes that are eutropicized, and we know that eutrophication can lead to toxic bacteria blooms, breakdown of natural structures, the edges of the rivers and shores, physical and mental health of local residents are also affected. And of course, there's greenhouse gas production, not solely by motorboat use, but also by the eutrophication of lakes. So, scientific studies, we have two that we particularly use there. Done in Quebec, 7 meters deep, any wake boat will mix sediments up to 7 meters down, and this contributes to the eutrophication of such lakes. And such wake boats 300 meters from the shore still causes erosion. Before the energy of the wake dissipates, it does erode the shore. It takes at least 300 meters. So an ideal corridor would be required to prevent that. What we hope for at Coalition Navigo is protection of water bodies and navigation organized by the level of depth of lakes, the bathymetry of bodies of water, which allows us to understand the shape of bodies of waters. This can be crossed with the effects, what we know from scientific studies, to ensure better navigation practices. Safe and sustainable navigation will help ensure that we operate properly. We should have a mandatory code like the driver's code, highway code. We're certainly emphasizing the fact that right now there's no environmental notions included in navigation regulations. The boat driver's card that you can just get online includes absolutely no information about the effects of navigation, about the effects on the environment. We would like to ensure that it be necessary to have a card to be able to navigate a boat, and that this card resemble something like what we have for cars and include the notions of safe and sustainable navigation. We also wish to offer services to municipalities that need to change their regulations. We want to work with municipalities. We have started to do so with due respect, of course, for the rules in their regulations. We also want to ensure that we have a sustainable navigation future. I'm not sure if you've seen the presentation we submitted, but we submitted an ad that produced by boat makers, and basically what they say is that a lake is an unlimited playground. That's not true. Our lakes are not limitless playgrounds. We want to counter this approach with an awareness-raising campaign. Our campaign has already been organized, made up of 6 messages: navigate to protect the ecosystem. And here, if you're talking to people who are creating waves and wakes, I'm not sure if you can see that, but it's a very attractive image that we have here. People will be able to relate to this, navigate and reduce erosion.
Je vais faire ça.
Yes, I'll do so quickly. We also have a recommendation to recognize within the legislation the environmental impacts of pleasure boating, define a new definition of boating that takes into account the environment, define them, the rules based on bathymetry of bodies of water, and set in a safe and sustainable navigation code that is mandatory, and introduce new codes and licenses linked to them.
Prochain, Fédération Québécoise.
Now we will hear from the Fédération Québécoise de Défense des Lacs et Cours d'eau, which is a Quebec Federation for the Protection of Lakes and Waterways. Thank you for having us. I am Constance Ramachiri, the chair of our federation, whom with a member of the board with me. Our young group was created in 2022. We already have at least 150 members from 11 administrative regions of Quebec. Our mission is to be the voice of associations, municipalities, and organizations concerned with protecting bodies of water. Our members insisted that we participate in and submit advice during the last online consultations about Vessel Operation Restriction Regulations, or VORR. And our opinions were signed by 35 associations. We'd like to share with you 3 observations that are central to our view of and our commitment to recreational boating. First, avoid a democratic deficit. I think this is an important issue. It's at the core of any democracy, and democratic deficits to us have to do with the representation of small municipalities in Quebec which do not have access to a federal regulation about navigation. When I'm not in this role, I'm a city councillor, so you'll understand that I understand clearly the point of view of small municipalities in Quebec. According to the Canada Gazette of September 14, 2024, Transport Canada receives on average 3 requests for a year for help with these VORR regulations. That's from 1,104 municipalities in Quebec, of which 700 count less than 2,000 inhabitants. Meanwhile, Quebec has over 500,000 lakes. So 3 requests a year. It's going to take a long time to get everyone inscribed. Municipalities in Quebec don't all want to regulate navigation, but even we receive over 3 requests for help a year. According to Transport Canada's regulatory impact analysis of 2023, it would take 2,380 hours for local authorities to complete a single application for inclusion in Schedule 4, representing an overall cost of nearly $100,000. The vast majority of small municipalities in Quebec and other provinces surely have neither the financial nor the professional resources to undertake this process. It's clear that these conditions discourage local elected officials from taking advantage of the lake protection measures offered by these regulations. For most Quebec municipalities, the virtual impossibility of accessing federal regulation constitutes an important democratic deficit. It's our opinion that it's Transport Canada's duty to ensure that local authorities can take advantage of the benefits of a federal regulation of navigation without delay, excessive constraint, or prohibitive cost. Our second point: acknowledge that environmental threats are the primary justification for restrictions. Regulation modernization must be undertaken to meet an environmental need. Safety and peace of mind remain important, true, but environmental threats and their consequences are paramount and increasingly serious. Many bodies of water, particularly in the south, where human activity is intense, show signs of accelerated eutrophication. Several factors contribute to this degradation, but many studies point to certain boating activities having significant impacts on water quality. That's been mentioned, and we'll continue to discuss it. There is a study that we can refer you to about Black Lake, Lac Noir, 2017, where there's a clear link made between navigation and the poor quality of water quality, co-signed by Ms. Rosa Galvez, who is a senator, of course, Senator Rosa Galvez. We feel that modernization efforts must acknowledge the characteristics of bodies of water, such as size and depth, but in particular their level of eutrophication. We really must speak to environmental urgency. You know as well as we do that what they are, the cyanobacteria blooms, the need to protect vulnerable species, and so on. Third, exercise responsible government leadership. We hoped to tell you about Vermont, but that's been discussed on Wednesday, so we thought we might bring up another topic that was touched on Tuesday, the economic effects.
I'll go very quickly. L'impact économique.
Yes, the economic impact on the value of shoreline properties. If there's cyanobacteria in a lake, the effect on the value of shoreline properties, it can represent a loss of 52% of their value. Imagine what that represents for municipal taxes.
I'll take advantage
Merci
of it.
pour les bons témoins.
Merci beaucoup. Goes fast, 5 minutes.
It does. Prochaine et Association des...
Next, we shall hear from the Association des Riverains et Amis du Richelieu.
Monsieur Collard.
Mr. Collard, you...
Monsieur Collard, c'est moi. Allô?
Rénal Collard.
Écoutez, moi, je fais partie d'une association.
Look, I'm a member of an association that was created based on a request from my federal MP who had noted that there was a conflict between pleasure craft owners and shoreline property owners. So about 10 of us got together and we reviewed the situation. The erosion of the shorelines, of course, the Richelieu is a river that overflows in the spring, but nevertheless is also affected by water waves all year. There are more marinas, more boats as of 20 years, bigger boats. The wave action of the boats is now considerable. And so the height of the waves and the resulting shoreline deterioration, that's what we wanted to address. In the villages, there are a lot of small craft and even mooring areas that have been deteriorated, affected by this wave action. So we wanted people to talk about this. It's quite an extraordinary area, the Richelieu River. I think it's the river that is most used in all of Quebec, if not Canada, 60 kilometers. There are about 20 marinas, from 800 to 1,000 private wharfs on this river, to which we have to add the large boats going through. These are boats sometimes heading down to the Bahamas, to the Caribbean Ocean. And, of course, there are so many more pleasure boats now. It's really quite extraordinary, the increase. And often these are now motorboats, water skiing, all types of surf boats, motor surf boats. They're quite horrific. I mean, why should one use this in a small river that's only 200 meters wide? I mean, perhaps in the Lachine Rapids or the St. Lawrence, Gulf of the St. Lawrence, fine. But so what we learned was that there was no regulation, really, to discipline, to organize this onslaught of pleasure craft. So we wanted to address this. We wanted to ensure that the wave action be reduced on the shorelines for private homes and also for public areas. There are fish, of course, that are specific to the river, that come into the river to breed and which exit the river in the spring. Take the Richelieu away from this fish and there will be no more of this fish. We were mentioning earlier drinking water. In the lower Richelieu River, where I live, 24,000 people drink the river. That's 12,600,000 liters a day. So that's 100,000 people use this water if you take the entire Richelieu area. What are we going to do about this? Of course, we had problems with CIL in the past, a large company, and BPC, and someone recently said, can we pump out the mess in the bottom of the river right now? I said it would be impossible. It would cost, it would be an astronomical cost. So people wonder, what can we do now to deal with this problem? Look, it's clear. In the mud, well, it's there. You can't take it out, basically, but you have to stop working up this sediment and turning the sediment over. We've seen figures about this, about wave action. I think 7 meters deep, is what you have to protect. So that's the sort of regulation that we would like to see. There was something that was passed in December 2023 about one of these factors, the speed of the craft. So the speed as a function of the shorelines, as a function of the bathymetry, how deep the water is.
That would be great.
OK, juste pour dire qu'on est très content.
So just to say that we're really very happy to have seen that bill passed in Parliament. It took 7 years to prepare it. Now we have to ensure that it's applied, that it's enforced. It will require some enforcement on the waterways to make sure it all works.
Starting with the Conservatives for a 6-minute round. Dr. Lewis, I believe you're up there.
I thought you were up first.
Oh, stand up. Sorry, my apologies. Mr. Muse?
News to me.
I thought you were up first.
All right, I'll make it up. Thank you. Welcome. So maybe you can, each of the witnesses, do you have any data on what the boat traffic has been in your particular area? I mean, I know each of you represent a different portion of, there's a federation of Quebec, but there's also the Richelieu, which of course is one corner of the province. And the coalition, I'm not sure which geography, but is there any data on what the boat traffic has been, say, 5 years ago, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, and then this past year there's been an increase, decrease? What does that look like?
Oui, vas-y. Je peux tenter d'y répondre parce que
I can try to give you an answer because we are neighbors of Memphremagog and MCI, which testified here on Tuesday. They have carried out a survey of the number of boats on Lake Memphremagog before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and after the pandemic. Of course, there were significantly more during the pandemic, and now there are less than then. I'm sure that Memphremagog Conservation would be happy to share that information with you. And that's a large lake, like Memphremagog, 40 kilometers in length. This gives you a good idea of what it probably looks like elsewhere. I know that on small lakes, there are extraordinary numbers of craft that have turned up in the last few years, such that now, we regularly discuss the maximum number of craft that a lake can carry. How can one evaluate correctly whether a lake can regenerate itself after so many craft have been used on them for so many years?
si vous permettez, je pourrais mentionner.
If I may, I will mention the carrying capacity for a lake. Let's take Le Lac des Sables in Sainte-Agathe, which has a carrying capacity for motorboats of about 31. And right now, there are 660 motorboats on it. The new boats coming in, they're all very large craft. I mean, really, with very big motors, ballasts, wave action, which really do not take into account the depth of where they are navigating.
So, I mean, I've traveled throughout the Memphremagog area. In fact, I was there in the summer of 2023 visiting friends, and as well the Richelieu area previously. Obviously, all of those areas border U.S. states, New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. Are there any best practices from south of the border that we should be looking at?
On a parlé un peu plus tôt avant-hier.
A little earlier, the day before yesterday, mention was made of Vermont legislation. They have standards taking into account environmental studies that were carried out in Quebec about how far from the shoreline a boat should be and the bathymetry, the depth, very similar than what they're doing to what we say in the Quebec studies. If I may add, Vermont regulations are applicable as of today. This is the first year it's being applied, enforced, specifically with regard to the wake and to sports which create wakes, and limits such sports to only 30 lakes across all of Vermont based on the standards that have now been passed.
The other states, New York, New Hampshire, and Maine, or just Vermont?
Most probably, but unfortunately, we don't have the information right here now today.
All right, thank you, Mr. Muse. I believe we're on to Mr. Lausanne from the Liberal Party for 6 minutes, please.
Merci. Merci à tous les témoins d'être là.
Thank you, and
merci.
thank you to our witnesses for being here with us. Thank you to Mr. Collard for being online with us. Let me begin with you, Ms. Cloutier. In your opening statement, you mentioned the evolution, the development of new boats, and picking up on Mr. Moises' question, who asked whether there were more or less boats, but you have found that there are more, and there are larger boats, even electric boats, which are high performance. Could you tell me a bit about electric boats? Have you felt that the power of these boats is also high and that they create quite a wake as well, have a lot of wave action? With permission, the powerful electric motors cost so much more than traditional motors that we don't see very many of them. The last boat show, there were some that were 600 horsepowers electric behind boats. And I was wondering, where would you put such a thing? There aren't that many lakes in Quebec that are 600 meters wide. It seems boat makers are building bigger and bigger boats, and there's nothing to prevent people from buying them and sticking them on the lakes. Of course, municipalities might be able to control this to some extent, but once a boat is there, there's nothing to be done about it. A witness today, on Tuesday, from a boat maker told us that there were less boats being sold and smaller boats going onto the lakes. Could you tell us what you feel about this? Let's begin with Ms. Ramacheri. What's your perspective on that idea, that there are less and smaller boats being sold in Canada? I'll leave this to Mr. Sicard. We don't have any data about boat sales. What we know, though, is that on some lakes, wake-creating boats are creating a number of environmental problems. Somewhat, as in Vermont, we would need national standards. All very well to try to simplify by working from the point of view of municipalities, but if we don't get a national standard to ensure there are appropriate boats used in the right places, applying the right practices, it will remain very complicated for small municipalities. Everyone will be stuck with paperwork and confusion and duplication. So this is a federal responsibility under the Constitution. We need national standards. Another highly important matter here is the economic point of view. We need an overall view. Yes, it's very important to sell boats. It's a very large sector, and we're not turning our noses up at it at all. But we have to take all these matters into account, because once a lake or a river, we've been discussing the Richelieu, once it runs into environmental problems, it can cost hundreds of millions to try to save it. And very often it's impossible to do so. We need to keep all these factors in mind in any economic analysis. I think this is a federal responsibility. I think we've made a good deal of progress recently, technically, about regulations, but right now we need to bring this to a higher level to get an overall approach that will ensure that our children have access to healthy lakes and rivers. We need a long-term view. You're mentioning federal responsibility for regulation. regulation that currently exists, do you agree that this is a joint responsibility? That people living on the shorelines, associations that support environmental regulation, municipalities, the government of Quebec, the federal government. Earlier, you mentioned including in the legislation awareness raising about the environment. I mean, the Minister of Transport isn't the Minister of Environment, but we do need to all work together, all departments and all levels of government. In the new regulations, our aim, and we're in consultation until through the 28th of November on this, to review the regulations, to simplify procedures, cut the red tape. For some of you, it's taken 7 years, as Mr. Collard said. But right now, the process takes about 4 years once you get at it, but that's too long, I agree. But this allows us to regulate. We've had witnesses come in to state that we can regulate water with a special squad with the regulations already in place, and they seem satisfied with this. They're satisfied with what's been available already for a good decade. What could we do better other than just, talking to each other, working together, and making it easier to apply the regulations that already exist?
30 secondes pour votre réponse, s'il vous plaît.
Well, you have a greater capacity than small associations and municipalities of Quebec. If you take a municipality with 25 lakes that wants to change a regulation, it needs to run 25 separate requests. That makes no sense. There are a number of things you could do to make it much easier for municipalities to take action. Thank you, Chair.
Interpretation, Mr. Lausanne. And next up, we have the Bloc Québécois and Mr. Barcelou Daval for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being with us today. I'm so pleased to receive you. This is a study that ideally would last longer than the time we've allotted for it, but we'll do the best we can and move ahead. So let me begin by asking you the following question that was brought up in the last meeting. Brought up, but perhaps not fully answered, the limits on the number of boats, how many boats a lake can take. You know that there are ways to measure how many boats a lake can take, its carrying capacity, or a river. But is there really a method, a calculation method for this? There are studies showing that there is a method. I can't quote that for you right now, but it takes into account the size of the lake, the number of boats, how much space a specific boat needs to move around on the lake, as well as social factors. All of that is included. I actually wrote a article about that in a Quebec newspaper. Many studies support this. Thank you. I'm so sorry, Mr. Collard. You spoke briefly about regulations that apply on the Richelieu, and I was involved in that in my riding, actually. And you mentioned that it took 7 years for that to occur. I'd like to know whether you think that makes sense, that it took so long, 7 years, to get somewhere with this project. And I'd also like to know what this was like for you. What did you feel like throughout that long process? What's your lived experience?
Alors, j'ai vécu ça quand même dans la joie.
Well, I was very encouraged by the process. So, there were 12 of us. We worked well together. We enjoyed the work. We encouraged each other. We had specific aims about responsible navigation. We wanted to protect the Richelieu and hand it down to our children and grandchildren as a heritage. What particularly strikes me is that the type of regulation that was adopted in December 2023 provides a good model. the work we did since December, I mean, there was the 4-year this that have been mentioned. Now people can work faster. I think that from the federal level, you have stepped in to ensure it takes less time to make it easier for municipalities. I think the federal government can do more there too, can insist on that. From my point of view, there are municipalities such as Saint-Ours, Saint-Roch, Belleuil, where people are considering using these regulations. You know, it's coming. It's around the corner. It's on the horizon. That's what I tell them. Look, there's a model version now. Go see your MP, your federal MP. Thank you. I'll interrupt. I want to make sure to have time to put some other questions. So there's a question I'd like to ask that I also asked at the last meeting, and I don't think people really knew what to answer. So during this, in the annexes, it's possible to regulate the power of a motor and so on, but it seems there are some things that you can't request, such as anchoring or to completely prohibit wave action. That you know of, are there other places in the world where such things are permitted, although they aren't permitted in the Canadian regulations? Generally speaking, navigating doesn't necessarily mean you have to use a marina. I've been out on the water with someone who felt they could anchor in a protected ecological zone between specific protected islands because it was just so pretty and there was less wave action from other boats. And they thought this was like fine, but it was a protected zone, and these are very specific plants that grow there. And so I said, no, you can't anchor there. You have to anchor somewhere else. The Richelieu, 50 kilometers of it. If we take out the canals, there are perhaps 100 kilometers over which one can anchor easily. So when it comes to the Coalition Navigation or the Fédération Québécoise de Défense des Lacs et Cours d'eau, would you have anything else to add? Perhaps a few points. In the United Kingdom, they have created zones which are lake zones that are protected, and the government chooses these areas, and navigation cannot occur unless it's under 10 kilometers an hour. So basically, that means that you can use sailing ships and nothing else. You can sail, not use boat remotes. So they say there are some lakes that require protection, and we say the same thing. There are lakes that are of great value. They may have a tourism value. We want to protect them for the future. That's our responsibility. So with that in mind, should a department such as Environment, Fisheries and Oceans get involved?
Ms. Dance, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much to all the witnesses who've come out tonight to share information with us. We really appreciate it. So I guess some of the stuff that I found the most jarring, Ms. Coutier spoke about the 31 vessels that were found on, or that was a lake that had only 31 vessels should have been on it, but over 600 are operating on it. I'm kind of interested to know how the government could deal with that. Like, what are some of the suggestions that she might have, and any recommendations to tackle that issue moving forward?
One of the recommendations made by the coalition is that rather than coming up with specific restrictions for each lake, the government could provide overall directives based on bathymetries of lakes. So the Lac des Sables, for example, has on average 20 feet of depth, a little under 7 meters. And thus, there should never be any wake boats on such a shallow lake. If the federal government were to set in a standard to the effect that based on the depth of lakes, there are zones in which certain types of boats are allowed or not, and then municipalities would be able to apply this. standard. But the federal government would need to move first, state that there is a standard based on bathymetry, based on studies we've mentioned, and many others that confirm this. We want to protect the environment, and that would be the federal government's responsibility. That would be the easiest way to proceed. And thus you wouldn't receive all these calls about setting in specific restrictions lake by lake.
Would it be better if the federal government empowered municipalities to make some of these decisions?
Le niveau municipal est un niveau...
The municipal level of government is very small scale, as Constance mentioned. And often boat owners who have large properties will infiltrate associations aiming to protect the lakes and ensure that they're able to do whatever they want. Mayors of small municipalities are poorly placed to manage that sort of situation. And our coalition has always said the municipal level of government is what the feds seem to be relying on, but it's just too close to residents to be effective. Mayors have actually been dragged into court because they dared try to restrict the use of boats. So we think that the regional RCMs, the regional county municipalities, would be a better level to work at. There is less, well, let's say, politicization of the discussion. There's a certain level of impartiality at that level.
For the federal government to fix these issues? Should they be the government, shoulder the financial burden of that? And what would that look like across the board, realizing that some are lakes that are more used, Carter's Country, compared to, say, some in northern provinces?
Can I answer that?
Oh, certainly.
This is just a fleeting thought, because the question was posed on Monday, and I was thinking, how would the government do that? Well, if the government is Ministry of Transport, you have roads where people go at 30 kilometers an hour. You have other roads that people go at 50 kilometers, and then on and on, depending on the type of road and where you are in the country. And it's a shared responsibility. And it's a shared responsibility for everyone to say, this type of road in front of a school, I go at 30 kilometers an hour. So in this type of a lake where it's fragile, I go at 10 kilometers an hour. That's the government's responsibility. That's what we're saying. It is the government's responsibility to look forward, to look ahead, to look to the future, because we are all in your hands. You are the organization that is most responsible to be able to do this across the country.
Si vous permettez de faire du millage sur ce que...
If I may pick up on what Ms. Ramacheri has just said, at the very outset, upstream, we need to train youth, people who aren't so young as well, who go to get their navigation cards, a bit like a driver's license. You know, you can pass your tests on the internet for a boat, never practice. And young people or older people who've never navigated can take off with a $150,000 boat and go wherever they want in any which way they please. Speed, courtesy, etc. If you want to act on these factors, you need to train people from the very outset. In the guide for motoring operation cards, we should address environment. Right now, there's nothing about the environment when people receive these cards. It wouldn't cost a lot.
We're just about out of time there. You have 15 seconds left. You're okay? Thank you, Ms. Dance. Next up, we return to the Conservatives and Dr. Lewis.
The witnesses for coming today for this very important study. Ms. Cloutier, I would just like you to expand a little bit on, you spoke about the mandatory code and the mandatory code for licenses that should be issued. Is this by the federal government that you believe that it should be issued, and what should it include?
Yes, by the federal government, just like you have. Je vais parler en français, ça va être plus facile. Excusez-moi.
It'll be easier for me to address you in French, if I may. Given much as we have a criminal code, though it isn't necessarily the federal government that necessarily enforces it, municipal and provincial police officers also enforce it. So as Constance was pointing out, it would be a shared responsibility to apply it. The federal government right now manages navigation, regulates navigation. So that's why it would be best to deal with it at that level of government. How? With a mandatory code and a mandatory license, and with courses.
You had mentioned that the lakes have some lakes, and you cited one specifically had over 600 boats when the capacity was 31. How is that capacity determined?
C'est une formule mathématique qui tient compte
by a mathematical formula taking into account the width of the lake, the size of the lake, the depth of the lake, and the type of boat. Add all the boats up and compare that to the capacity of the lake to receive specific boats, and there you have it. I don't have the formula by heart, of course, but I have written a newspaper article about it in Quebec that touches on all the studies that have been carried out about carrying capacity. If I may, the carrying capacity of any environment is that environment's ability to self-correct, to regenerate, to protect itself long-term, to remain sustainable, to not die. So if you put too much pressure on a lake, let's say, too many boats, too much phosphorus, too much silt, too much petroleum, then the lake dies. The carrying capacity is a measure of up to what point the environment can regenerate, will still be there next year. It's not just a number. It's about a capacity to return to its natural state and remain sustainable.
More of a objective test that people could look to understand how to regulate and formulate. So that was the nature of my question. I also want to ask about your reference to buying boats that are too big for the lakes. What do you propose is the solution for that?
Comme on l'a mentionné,
as we've said, people buying a boat should be in a position to know environmental rules. We fall back on our two studies, which show that you have to be 300 meters from the shore for a wake boat and 7 meters depth. And the wake action of boats that create wakes are what cause more damage than any others. And the studies, the Laval University study, for one, studies a number of types of boats and their effects. So ensuring that navigation is regulated based on bathymetry of the water bodies would keep things safe. There would be a best practices guide for specific lakes proposed by the municipalities based in science.
The marinas that's going to say that your boat is too big, it can't operate here. Is it at the place that you're buying it? How do you operationalize this concept of ensuring that people have the right size boats for the capacity of, say, for example, the lake?
Mm-hmm. It depends. Si c'est un résident de la place, il va vouloir conserver.
Let's say if it's a local resident, they will want to ensure their lake is sustainable. They will want to be involved in protecting it if they have knowledge, because most of the time people who have these boats don't understand that their boat has an effect. That is why, if we could provide them with this information in a guide, when they get their license and so on, they will pay attention to this. Now, people who are just moving through, who might be bringing their boat to the lake temporarily, they should, well, the municipality should be in a position to provide them with necessary information by zoning areas where they can go with such and such a type of boat.
Monsieur Yarcono, next questioner.
Merci. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Ma question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Ms. Ramashieri. Your organization has run consultations on a number of sectors, environment, urbanization. For example, tell us what struck you most in the consultations that you ran. For example, how much people knew, people's will to improve the situation, the public's awareness, and their interest in their lakes. Sorry, run consultations? I'm not quite sure what you're referring to. Your organization, hasn't it run consultations on navigation? Not specifically. We have been called on by organizations to participate in Transport Canada's consultations, and we did so in their last 3 consultation processes, working with various organizations, but we haven't specifically gone out and consulted the population. All right, I'm sorry, that's what I had understood or misunderstood. Let me move on to the next question. Thank you for that, Madame. And this question is for Ms. Cloutier. Your organization supports environmental protection, which is something of concern for our government as well. Are there any specific regulations, essential regulations, that should be changed? And could you give us some examples of them? Okay, key regulations. The vehicle operation restriction regulations, of course. There are a number of elements that it does take into account, such as speed. And that is certainly one of the factors when you want to request restrictions. You can ask for a restriction on speed. But speed is not necessarily a factor that will have much of an effect on the wave action of a wake boat. A wake boat can travel 10 kilometers an hour but still create 4-foot-high wave action. Pretty considerable. It's like the regulations haven't kept up with the new technologies that boat constructors have come up with. So the regulations would have to take into account not only just speed, but also the actual boat itself, its wave action, how much it turns up the sediment, how much ballast is involved, and so on and so forth. That's one example. Thank you so much. And I leave the rest of my time to Mr. Stéphane Lauzon. Thank you. Mr. Collard, you've been pretty convincing in your presentation of a number of phenomena you see, the great number of marinas and boats and large boats as well that you've seen. You also mentioned the greater number of water sports. I know that you've been there for quite a while and that you represent your association, but do you have this data based on studies, or is this something you've noted via your organization? You are on mute, I believe, Mr. Collard. Very well, thank you. We haven't run a study. What we can say is that, we live on the shoreline of the river, so we can see what's going on. Lake Memphremagog's study, I think it was the University of Montreal, I believe, that conducted the study. We haven't done that per se. The 300 meters from the shoreline, we have a 200-meter limit on our river, and people shouldn't be doing wakeboard, for example, there, but they do. Yes, but what we're trying to do is log documentation that demonstrates what you're saying about what's going on where you are. I'm not sure what we could do to provide such documentation. Nevertheless, you've told us about it, but do you have any data demonstrating how climate change has affected the situation. You know, there are more storms, there's more wind. Does that have an effect on the shoreline? Is it eroding your shoreline? And I'll ask everyone to answer this question, but do you have any scientific data about the environment itself and its effect on your river? Well, the scientific data we have includes the observations that we make about the use of boats in deep areas. For example, I've seen boats going into shallow areas just to sort of have fun running around the buoys to see how the buoys would pop up and down under its boat. This was just incredible, this type of behavior. Thank you, Mr. Collard. We can see that this is based on your experience, but it would be helpful to have studies from any organizations that you're aware of. Thank you.
Return to the Bloc québécois and Monsieur Barcelou de Vel.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. One of my colleagues wished to ask during our last meeting. I don't think we had a chance to get into it, and I would like to get into it with all the organizations around the table now. In your experience in the regulation process, for vessel operation restriction regulations, we have to first try a non-regulation-based approach. That's why it takes longer to work through this, and then there are the consultations, and there's documenting the file, and so on and so forth. So, based on your experience, have you ever seen any non-regulation-based approaches that have succeeded, such that you didn't need to bring in regulations or anything mandatory? But perhaps Ms. Ramasiri could begin. This gives me a chance to say that as a municipal councillor, we are now asking for a VORR for Lake Memphremagog. You've perhaps heard about it last Tuesday. For years now, we've been trying to apply awareness-based approaches, non-regulation approaches to get people to go ahead and make their wakes but elsewhere. It just does not work. Ms. Cloutier, we studied this because we now offer municipalities the option to have us help them. So we're really aware of the whole process, how it works. I'm terribly sorry. I just lost my train of thought there. But your question is, are you aware of any successful non-regulation-based approaches? Well, we do have a client, the town of Saint-Hubert, that went through the entire process as of 2 or 3 years ago. So we are integrating the awareness-raising approach with them. And yes, there's a slight effect, but not enough. And what they want is an ongoing result, something that will be sustainable. Mr. Collard? All right, the non-regulation-based approach. Do you think that this could ever work? Well, yeah, you can provide information. For months now, I've been on the Facebook pages of Sorel and Lacolle, these towns, to explain, especially to young people, what the effect of using a wave action boat on shorelines and so on. But I believe in well-applied regulations. Yes, this will require some patrolling and so on. I'd like to add, though, earlier you were asking what we could do.
C'est parce que, écoutez, on l'a le modèle, on l'a fait, le modèle.
We have the model. We've tried it. It was brought to you at the federal level in 2023 in December. You've got it. Apply it. Thank you.
Ms. Dance for 2 minutes and 30 seconds there.
I just wanted to maybe go back just a little bit. I'm curious about the licensing. I know there were talks about changing some of the, I want to call it driver's ed sort of thing. So there were talks. Is there other jurisdictions that have the more detailed program that you guys were thinking of implementing? And if so, were they seeing the results that you are hoping to achieve?
Je n'ai pas connaissance qu'il y ait ce processus-là.
I'm not aware of this process being used elsewhere. All I know is that there's considerable resistance from the boatmaker sector to having any sort of a license, a boating card that would sort of be in effect for only 5 years. I know of nowhere else where this is. But look, it works for cars. Why wouldn't it work for boats? You know, we need to protect a lake, just like we need to protect, let's say, roads. But people think they're on a road, but they're on a living lake. May I add something?
Please. Izzy.
Monsieur Collard.
OK, bon, ce que je veux dire, c'est
Okay, great. So what I want to say is that in the 60s, there was a model that kind of mucked things up for skidoos. You remember that? It was like total freedom. You could go anywhere you wanted on a skidoo. You could go into the forest. You could go through fields. You could go anywhere you wanted. You could go around houses. You could go through towns. It was wonderful. But there was like a considerable effect, and people got upset. And property owners said, no. We've got to organize these people. And I think we're going through the same thing with pleasure craft. In Quebec, it's quite recent. We don't have a long tradition of using pleasure crafts, of figuring out how to use them cautiously and respectfully. In the past, we weren't rich enough to buy these things, you know, but now we can. So it's kind of like skidoos. We need to regulate the situation. And people have mentioned highways. Yeah, sure. What people can do for highways with licenses, we can do the same thing on the lake. You know, you can measure speed and so on. There's no miracle here. It can be done.
That is time. I'd like to thank all the witnesses for providing their excellent testimony and all of the excellent questions as well. And so that will conclude our first panel. Thank you very much. We will pause now for 3 minutes to get the new witnesses in. And it will be 3 minutes because it's important for transportation that the trains are on time. Witnesses with us today. In the second hour, we have Massawippi Blue and Laurence Renaud Langevin, General Manager. Then we have Village of Fraser Lake, represented by Sarah Story. To begin with, each one of our organizations or witnesses will have 5 minutes to give their opening statement, and then we will begin questioning, starting with the Conservatives and working our way all the way through our parties. So if we could start with Laurence, that would be fantastic. 5 minutes, please.
Great. Monsieur Lawrence, distingués membres du comité, je vous...
Mr. Lawrence, Mr. Chair, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for granting me the opportunity to address you today. I'm Laurence Renaud Langevin, Executive Director of Massawippi Blue, a nonprofit organization in existence since 1968 in Quebec. Our mission is to preserve and improve the ecosystem health of Lake Massawippi and its watershed. We work closely with partners to achieve this goal. I'm also a scuba diving instructor. In this role, I'm responsible for operating a small vessel in a protected zone. I will first summarize our scientific article, peer-reviewed and published, on the impact of navigation on Lake Massawippi, and then present a recommendation based on our studies and my own experience. In 2018, Transport Canada commissioned Massawippi Blue to study the impacts of motorized boats on the lakes of southern Quebec. Over 2 years, we monitored shoreline erosion and turbidity in Lake Massawippi, evaluating natural and boat-related factors of this erosion, and came up with insights into boats' effects on freshwater ecosystems. Phosphorus levels rise with turbidity and rainfall. Indeed, boat waves contribute to sediment resuspension and phosphorus levels. This highlights the need for policies that minimize sediment disturbance. Leisure boating, a popular and economically significant activity, increases natural shoreline erosion by displacing soil, in particular in narrow channels. Propellers in shallow water disrupt sediment in waters up to 9 meters down. Natural factors such as wind and rainfall further influence turbidity. Our results show correlations between boat traffic intensity, water turbidity, and total phosphorus in the water, with turbidity increasing with wind speeds and plankton levels and decreasing with slope angle. These correlations justify implementing or enhancing speed limit restrictions near shorelines, such as enforcing a 10-kilometer-an-hour speed limit within 100 meters of shorelines, or 300 feet. A baseline should be established for every type of body of water in the country. In light of all this, and based on my experience as a diving instructor, my recommendation to strengthen environmental and boating safety is to review the process for obtaining a pleasure craft operator's license. I find it specious, in fact unnatural, that going through the steps to obtain a car driver's license can take up to 12 months, without even mentioning special driver classifications that require additional courses, while obtaining a boating license takes only 3 hours. People can buy, launch, and operate a boat without having their driving skills or knowledge levels checked. Most boating and environmental safety issues could be resolved if we approached a boating license the way we do a car license. A boating course ensures you learn the meaning of all the buoys, as well as the impact of non-compliance with regulations. You could even introduce different classes of boating licenses, such as a wake surf license that could require specific skills checks with higher registration fees, be given that they create more environmental effects than a simple 12-foot rowboat. The system could generate funds to support environmental protection and conservation programs. It could also create job opportunities, as instructors would be needed to teach the skills. We could introduce boating and environmental safety concepts and evaluate boat operators' understanding of these before allowing them onto the water. It would be easier to reintroduce these skills and knowledge bases ongoing rather than introducing them late in the game. This would allow for consistency nationwide ensuring that our waters would be used safely and responsibly. It could be an additional measure to a Canada-wide regulation of recreational boating for all waterways, simplifying the management by municipalities. Although municipalities could add further regulations for the specificity of their local bodies of water.
Ms. Renaud Lejeanvon. Next, we have Ms. Story for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Story. I'm the mayor of the village of Fraser Lake, which is a community in north central BC. And excuse my voice today, it's a little raspy. It's not my normal voice. So I'm in a place called the Lakes District, which is an extremely beautiful place in rural northern BC, which is really right in the center of British Columbia. If you're looking for us, we're just west of Prince George by an hour and a half. So we're on the traditional territory of the Notley-Wet'en and the Slatin First Nations, and the three communities and the region are facing massive economic downturns in mining and forestry, and we're focusing on a variety of strategies, including tourism, to encourage growth and economic development. So this will help us build a sustainable economy with or without industry. So that leads us into what we are doing with the lake that we live on and what is happening in our region with a level 5 drought as well. So right now we are seeing a level 5 drought, which we wrote a resolution in 2018 to deal with the water hazard buoys and water hazard issues that we were seeing with the reefs on some of the lakes in our region. Francois Lake and Fraser Lake I live on Fraser Lake, and Francois Lake's about 15 minutes from me. So we passed that resolution at our area association, and then it went to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, where it was passed again, and then went off to FCM. So we have these hidden reefs within our lakes, and they are unmarked, and they're causing safety concerns. So as you can imagine, the lake levels were considerably higher in 2018. Now with our level 5 drought, we are seeing some major issues. So just to add context to this conversation, the dam closest to us, the Nechaka Reservoir, it creates electricity, and it is critically at low levels right now. So at the end of summer of this year, it was 6.6 meters under normal average levels, which is huge. And it has come up over 2 meters with some heavy rain and snow lately, so that's great, but it is still 4 meters under average levels. So when I first learned that we could not put water hazard buoys on these dangerous reefs due to liability concerns, we had to do some research to learn how we could get that issue solved. Hence the resolution we built, which I'm just going to read to you in case some of you do not have it. It's short, so it shouldn't take too long. So whereas the village of Fraser Lake is concerned that unmarked water hazards pose a threat to the health and safety of persons involved in motorized water sports on freshwater lakes and rivers in British Columbia, and whereas the installation and maintenance of navigational markers and buoys will improve the safety of persons involved in motorized water activities. Therefore, be it resolved that the federal government of Canada install and maintain water hazard markers on known water hazards to protect lives and property on waterways in lakes, rivers, and streams. When local residents realized that they also faced liability issues, they removed any and all markers they had out on the lakes as well. So the village of Fraser Lake has been committed to protecting residents and tourists on local lakes. And with the idea of moving into more tourism on our lake, we want to make sure that we are really protecting people. So unfortunately, the hazard markers and the liability that they have, we necessarily can't always take that on as municipalities. The downloading that we are already facing is pretty tough. So protecting boaters with water levels that are receding each summer, hopefully that does change, but we don't know how it's going to work with climate change. So we'd like to strategize to protect lives and property, not at the cost of the local governments or private citizens always. So that is a strategy we would like to look at. So our ask is that the federal government of Canada provide municipalities the means to protect lives and property on waterways without liability to them. So according to the Transport Canada's Navigation and Protection Programs Guide, called An Owner's Guide to Private Buoys, I'll call them today. I normally said buoys, but I'll leave that alone today. Buoys Navigation Protection Program. So that guide, there's a quote in there that I'm going to share. It says, in the event of an accident involving a private buoy, the owners may be held liable for any resulting damages. This is why you should think about getting liability insurance coverage. So municipalities like mine cannot necessarily afford to take this on, and I'm not sure what the capacity is for local governments to maintain water hazard buoys on these dangerous reefs. And if anybody wants a picture, I have a few pictures that I have created over the years on some of these reefs that are really in the middle of these large lakes and you don't know they're there. And I can share those with anyone that would like to see them. And I'm going to leave it there and give us some time back.
That's perfect. Both of you were right on with your timing, so thank you very much. Appreciate that. We're going to start our questions with the Conservatives and Dr. Lewis there for 6 minutes.
Yes, I just want to thank the witnesses for coming here today. My first question is for Mayor Story. You had stated that you had talked about tourism on the lake, and it seemed to me that tourism is an important part of your community. Can you just give us some more detail about how tourism and recreational boating fits into your community?
Thank you for the question. So right at this time, with the mine and the sawmill closure, we are actually in the midst of looking at building a marina and a roundhouse restaurant, a discovery center, a boutique hotel, and looking at trying to get in a resort hotel. The resort hotel won't be on the lake, but the boutique hotel would be, and that would be close to the marina, which would have a rental center. We are having to completely diversify and change our economy. So we are looking at the lake, and we have a mountain that looks like a mouse and a nice pier already, but we have to diversify with what's happening here. So we are in the midst of trying to figure out how to do that and to protect the lake and the reefs and the people that are on them. So knowing that we're an hour and a half from Prince George, and a lot of people like to come through to the north to travel and to hunt and to fish and to recreate. We want to make sure that people are safe on the lakes, because right now there are just no safety measures in place. And people have noticed just in the previous session as well, if water sports are so important and injuries are of a concern because people aren't paying attention to the rules, even like the last speaker said, there are not people that are paying attention. I have my boater's license, but how often do you reassess and relearn what you've learned to make sure that you actually are paying attention to the rules? However, we don't do that maybe with driver's license either, and maybe we should be doing that, but we won't get into that today. So thanks for the question.
Different than some of the evidence that I've heard today, your approach seems to presume that you can balance environmental sustainability and protection of the lake with economic development. Is that correct?
Well, that is the goal. So the goal is to actually work with Notley and Stalaco to make sure we are preserving the lake. We don't want to be, and some of you won't know the lakes around here, but in the Lower Mainland, the lakes are insane. Like Chilliwack Lake is, there's thousands of people that go boating every day, or hundreds, and it's a little busy. We don't want it to be that busy, but we want it to also be protected. So we need to have rules in place to make sure that all of those things are being done. So it's all about balance to us, like most things are. So yes. It's very important. We have a lot of fish to protect as well.
Right. And in building a marina and potentially a hotel and a restaurant, those businesses would be very connected to the lake. So would it not be in your best interest to also make sure that you protect the lake while you are engaging in economic development of the area?
Yes, and that is the goal and the plan.
How many more minutes do I have? 3 minutes. Do you have any experience? Have you heard of any issues pertaining to the disposal of flares in recreational boating? Has that come across your desk?
No, we don't really have that issue right up here. No, and because of the northern issues with the fires in BC, you're not really allowed to. Nobody's setting off fireworks, and you don't see. There's not emergencies where people need to really be setting off flares. Hopefully, and if they did, then there would obviously be a reason. So no, that's not something that we face here.
And with your plans to develop the area, have you encountered any taxes on pleasure boats or federal regulations that you anticipate may deter people from engaging in recreational boating?
It depends on the person, I think. You know, some people are going to obviously be upset with luxury taxes on boats over, you know, a certain cost or whatever it might be. But in the north, because most people are hunters or fishers, I find there's a lot of money going around with the coastal GasLink areas. There's a lot of people that have boats and have grown up with boats in this area. So I haven't seen that or heard that to be, you know, the biggest issue that we're facing right now. There's so many other issues that we're facing first. Yeah.
Has your municipality applied for any changes to the vessel operation restrictions regulations?
Not at this time, and we do not see big boats on this lake.
I'm sorry?
I have seen. Not at this time. We do not see big boats on this lake. We rarely even see a sailboat. So we don't have huge boats on the lake.
And do you know why that is?
Well, the biggest boats we see are typically pontoon boats. It's a lot of local traffic only right now. So because we do not have a marina at this time, we are not seeing as many boats on the lake, and we protect our lake quite well. So we are on the highway, but people don't necessarily know the lake is there and how great the lake is. We're kind of protective of our fish, and we don't necessarily want, you know, thousands of people again on the lake doing lots of damage. We want to make it a slow progress sort of solution here to move us forward. But again,
thank you very much.
Sorry.
No, thank you very much. But that is the time, and I'm getting heckled here by my Liberal members here. They wanted to hear more there, so you know, Ms. Story. And I'm sure you'll get more opportunity. Mr. Lausanne, for 6 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup aux deux témoins d'être là.
Thank you to our two witnesses.
Story. Je vais poser ma question en français.
I'll put my question in French. I understand from your testimony, Ms. Story, that the luxury tax isn't an issue for you. It's not what you're dealing with. But you did speak about changes in water levels and the effects of forest fires in the north. You brought up changes recently, recent changes. Do you think that climate change has had an effect on your water reservoir?
Yes, thank you for the question. We know that climate change has had a direct impact to our water reservoir. There's never been a time where we've seen that level that I know of. 6.6 meters at the end of summer was what we were told, and that means they're having to buy power in BC to cover what we need for energy. And we've been trying, and we've been talking about balance for a long time in the energy sector in British Columbia, and we're definitely seeing a lot of changes. Fraser Lake is constantly in the news for wildfires all around us. We have a lot of beetle kill, a lot of issues with wildfire smoke, and that creates issues of its own with social isolation. So we're constantly dealing with a lot of things with climate change. And then that also leads to, if you do all of a sudden have an atmospheric river, you have lots of rain, very, very briefly, it'll be a short amount of time. The ground is not soaking up that water quick enough, and neither is the infrastructure that has been built. So it all of a sudden creates a little bit of flooding in some of the businesses in town. So we are seeing a lot of different things with climate change right now in northern BC. And but the lack there of rain has also been an issue, and the water levels also are going to create algae issues and algae blooms as well when the water is getting warmer. And that's we're seeing as well. So we're trying to find that balance. It's tough.
C'est une préoccupation que vous nous avez démontré clairement que les changements.
It's a concern that you have clearly outlined the impact of climate change, but you also mentioned the private boating guide, as well as regulations for licensing and so forth. Did you participate in the shipping law, to try to get some regulation of speeds, of navigation speeds?
Non, on ne nous a pas contactés pour faire cela. Mais quelle belle discussion on pourrait avoir sur le sujet, car cela a posé problème, surtout avec les récifs. Les gens sont au milieu du lac, ils ne savent pas qu'ils vont frapper les récifs. Maintenant, les niveaux d'eau sont plus bas, donc ça nous inquiète de plus en plus. Les gens font de la vitesse, les gens prennent un coup. On sait que ça fait partie de la réalité. Et on a peur qu'à un moment donné, quelqu'un blesse quelqu'un d'autre, se blesse. Et on a déjà vu des cas comme ceux-là. On ne peut pas tout contrôler, là.
En bateau, et puis la réglementation sur les ceintures de sauvetage et tout ce que ça prend pour naviguer sécuritairement. Je pense que c'est pas aux municipalités de supporter ça, mais bel et bien la police. Mais ça, on y reviendra. Parce que j'aurais peut-être...
Sorry, Monsieur Lausanne. Is there anyone else not getting interpretation?
Est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un d'autre qui ne reçoit
I didn't get any of yours, sir.
Est-ce que la...
I didn't receive the interpretation. Testing, testing.
On reprend.
Okay. Yeah. Give me back 30 seconds, maybe?
Vance wouldn't give that to you, but I will.
Yeah, okay. All right, sorry about that, the interpretation. I was just saying, je vais le dire en français, c'est pour ça qu'on a la traduction.
And I'll say it in French. That's why we do have an interpreter. I was just saying that, yes, it's certainly a concern, the application of rules on waterways. You mentioned drinking. There's also all the legislation that ensures that people are safe with all the equipment they need to stay safe in the water. It's not up to municipalities to apply this, but up to local police, really. And I hope that all institutions will work closely to protect the safety of people on waterways. Often it's not necessarily the people who own the boats, but the people they take out on their boats who wind up paying for mistakes. Ms. Renaud-Langevin, you told us about reviewing the pleasure craft process. I'd like more details. It's quite a detailed process. I was in the Navy over 40 years. Could you tell us more about how we could improve the process? I think it's simple. It's easy. It can be applied. But you're talking about bringing in more restrictions. Could you tell us what you're speaking about? Yes. I think on a practical basis, yes. Practically speaking, the process is simple. With an organization, you just register online, and within 3 or 4 hours, you can complete the course, and there you are. You've got your card coming in by mail, your boating card. I'm not sure about you, but reading a document or learning new notions, whether you're a youth or an adult, it takes me more than 4 hours and one read-through. Unless I'm someone who goes out on the water every day. I'm a fisher, but if I go out, only when it's good weather on Saturdays, having to remember all the buoys, all the navigation rules, I'd have difficulty remembering that after 4 hours. The rules themselves are 2 inches, a 2-inch thick book. So I think that a course should be insisted on. I don't want to cut in here, but the guide is accessible online. When you pass your driver's license, you don't take the course the same day that you pass the test. But you're saying that there should be training or something, mandatory training. Nothing prevents a boater from downloading the guide and learning about it before they go to the exam. So should we make further training mandatory? It could become mandatory, but I think here's what's happening. You can pass the exam online, so you can pretty much do the exam with the book open beside you. It's that simple. So you may not learn anything beyond the answers you need to succeed the exam. You can just quickly find the right pages to provide the right answers, and it's over and done with. It seems to be too simple. Thank you.
To the Bloc québécois and Monsieur Barcelou develop.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me begin with Massawippi Blue. Yes, that's right, Massawippi Blue. Several witnesses have told us that we need a basic set of regulations that would be applied broadly that could then be added to cover local needs of municipalities. What I would like to suggest to my colleagues is that without an undertaking to set regulations at the local level by a municipal level of government, well, there just isn't any regulation unless they do it. Do you think this is normal? You know, someone goes out on the water, and for most lakes and rivers across the country, there's just no rule. I'm not sure I understood your question, Mr. Barcelou-Zivad, but I don't think it's normal. No, basically, no, it's not normal. It's not appropriate. There is no process that requires that the boater have their knowledge and skills checked before they go out on the water. I myself, at least in our organization, we have a boat. We carry out scientific studies on the lake, and once a police officer intercepted us to check our equipment, did not check my license, actually. He never even asked if I had a right to be on the lake, and asked no questions about our environmental procedures. No checks on pretty much anything, really, when you're on a lake in Quebec. At least that's my experience. That's interesting. Theoretical and practical knowledge to obtain a boating license, very few people have brought that up. I think it's important that this be discussed by people who have lived experience of the situation. My question, though, is what do we need? Do we need like a basic set of regulations, a standard set of regulations? You've said this makes no sense, but what's the solution? Would it be a set of regulations? Would it be making it easier to access the current regulation process? Because if you go onto a lake and you can use any size boat and drive at any speed you want, this isn't ideal, is it? I think we need baselines that would apply to all lakes in the north, in the south, rivers, lakes, and so on. I think the studies are saying something, and they're saying the same thing, whatever lake or river they've studied. I think that a good effort has been made to cut the red tape and make it easier to participate in regulation. And I think that more financial support could be useful, though, for municipalities to help them go through the process. But yes, there should be an overall umbrella set of regulations. And then regional county municipalities or municipalities could go ahead and add details. I'm trying to ensure my mic is on. So there is a federal funding that local organizations can apply for funds to address prevention or awareness raising for nautical activities, but there is none for putting in buoys. We know that putting in buoys, when you've got a regulation that applies, you've got to put it in once. It happens one time, putting in the buoys. Do you think there should be federal government funding to help towns or villages cover these costs, which can be quite high. I agree with you. In Lake Massawippi, where we've been lucky, we did access such federal funding. We had a 2-year project called Intelligent Navigation, a lot of awareness raising. After that 2-year project, it came to applying the measures that we were aiming for with our awareness raising. So yes, a buoy costs between $200 to $600 just for the buoy itself, and then you have to hire people to put it in and so on and so forth. We don't really have that sort of funding available, to put 10 of them in. And I know that's the case for most towns and villages. So funding would be very helpful. How much time do we have left, Chair? 1 minute, thank you. My next question for you is as follows. Several people have come to tell us that we should have a science-based rule about let's say, the 300 meters from the shore for wave action, but for different types of boats. Let's say a standard boat. Let's say I'm driving a standard boat. How far should I be from the shore? What's an acceptable speed that would reduce harm? I think people have been confused, thinking that 300 meters would be used for every single type of pleasure craft. So what's the breakdown? Based on our study that we were mandated to carry out by Transport Canada, it showed that whatever the craft, it will generate a wave over 6 kilometers an hour within 100 meters or 300 feet from the shore, and that will create erosion and will create turbidity, disturb the sediment if you're under 3 meters depth, whatever the craft is. Thank you.
Sorry.
And we're up to the New Democratic Party and Ms. Dance, who I must say is a marked improvement over the usual NDP representative. I'm just teasing.
Okay. So thank you both witnesses for coming out. I really appreciate it. Mayor Story, I know Mr. Bacharach couldn't be here, so hopefully I can do him justice. So we appreciate you being here. I just wanted to maybe go back a little bit and talk a little bit about some of the difficulties you were having with potentially Transport Canada when you were talking about the buoys. I know you talked a little bit about the Village of Fraser passing a resolution and trying to get that. I'd like you to kind of talk a little bit about the process, whether you got the buoys installed, whereabouts you are in that, and what that looked like throughout that process.
So FCM only takes one resolution forward in Canada a year, and they called me when Garth Frizzell was the president and said, yeah, that one isn't going to make it. It was close, but it's I said, okay. And then there was nothing. So I've heard nothing since. I just came down to Ottawa for a conference, and I came and visited Taylor. MP Bacharach is my MP, so that was easy. And then he took me around, and I met a few people and had conversations about this resolution that we built in 2018. So it's been quite a long time since we built this resolution, and there's been no growth, nothing has happened with it, and it really does, and something does need to happen, because again, the water levels are going down, and it's just getting worse from 2018 to now, and you can stand on these reefs, yeah. So nothing's happened. Sorry, go ahead.
So did you have any contact with Transport Canada, or just because your resolution, or because they only take so many a year?
No, nothing has happened, and I don't know why, how that works, but that's just been how it's been. And again, I don't know how the process works there with those resolutions once they go forward. So I'll continue to work on that now that I'm third vice president of the UBCM, which is helpful, because then I can push resolutions from the federal side as much as the provincial side, which is something we haven't really done as much. So.
Perfect. And what about, I know the other witness talked a little bit about funding. Did you know about any of that funding? Is that something that you would be interested in accessing, especially since you'd be looking for more buoys?
Yeah, well, there's a couple parts here that I'd like to touch on. Technically, you know, it's one thing for us as a small municipality when we have limited staff. One of our staff members is a new economic development officer. He worked for the federal government and the provincial government. We only have two real staff members that do a lot of the grant applications. So it is time consuming. Capacity is a huge thing, especially when you have a $1.675 million deficit coming, knowing with the loss of industry, we all of a sudden have less capacity. So looking at funding and maintenance and then removal maybe in the winter of those buoys, there's certain things that go along with that. Our municipality doesn't own a boat. So, and the RCMP, I heard something a little while ago about, the local police should be, monitoring speeds. They don't do that. The RCMP do not do that in Fraser Lake. They don't have a boat either. Unless there's an emergency, we have to call the SAR team, the search and rescue team in. There's no boats monitoring the lake unless there's a major complaint with a child in the water that a boat almost hit, and then they'll go and do an investigation. So they don't have the capacity either to monitor some of this. So that would mean more work. So.
And one of the questions I asked the last few witnesses was about licensing. And I know that we've talked a little bit about licensing. Do you think that some of that would help? And then what expanded programs do you think? And so, sorry, this might be more for Miss Renaud Langvin. Sorry, I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly, but do you think any of that licensing or changes, do we know about any other jurisdictions that have a more detailed process that might be able to work here in Canada?
Well, I think, if we're not refreshing ourselves, we forget things. It's the same as driver's license. I really do think that it might actually help, even if you have to do a 20-minute refresher when you get your boating license, because you do forget things. She is correct in that, if you're not going out every day and you're not on the waterways every day, you might not even know what those buoys stand for. You have to literally figure it out. And I've seen people and I've heard of people losing their entire props because they didn't understand the navigational buoys. So they do need refreshers. People need to remember you're not going to remember it. So there could be work done there. It is people's responsibility, however, to do that work before they get in a boat. And it is based around education. You have to remind people, this is your responsibility, go and learn. And I'm noticing that with everything. So it's not just one thing. So.
Does the other, Ms. Renard Levin, do you want to answer or add to anything like that about that?
Well, just in the same sense as Ms. Sarah said, je vais répondre en français.
No, c'est d'accord. I'll respond in French. Sure, go ahead. Well, you either have to change the current measures or strengthen the measures when it comes to the license, because unless you're doing this every day, out there on the water every day, you're not going to know what that new buoy is out there for. You need a lot of education. If we don't say from the outset that it's mandatory and necessary to do this, people will just take the easy way out and not pay attention. That's my experience.
10 seconds left, Ms. Dents.
Perfect. That's it. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. And we've completed a successful first round of questioning. On to the second round, and we will begin with the Conservative Party and Mr. Muse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses on this second panel. And let me start with Mesa Whippy Bleu. I've actually been to the lake, not on a boat, I would point out. It's a beautiful corner of Quebec. And, I know you're not too far from the Vermont and New Hampshire border there. And I know you cited in your testimony some of the scientific research and projects that you've done. And I'm just wondering if your organization has had any interaction with similar organizations just over the border, because obviously the watershed would I think include areas of those particular states.
I have not personally directly have encountered with organism in Vermont or New York or Maine. One of my friends was actually here on Tuesday, Ariane Orjic at the MC Mimfrabgog. We work closely because we're 15 minutes apart of one another's lake. So whenever she gets information, she works closely with the Vermont. So she gives us information. To my knowledge, and to answer a question that was asked last Tuesday. Vermont has a new policy. Maine has a new policy also with the 300 feet and 10 kilometers. And New York is looking into it as well.
And what, in your view, because we've asked this similarly of other witnesses, would be the right balance between recreational boating and, obviously the health of the lake? Where does that balance lie?
I really think water is to everybody to access to. It belongs to everyone. I think if we do a careful and responsible and safe use of any lake, which includes how many boats get on a lake, you get the environment and safety that everybody is looking into it. Earlier, there was someone that talking about like the capacity of the lake, introducing that with technology already in use on how many boats are in the lake. You can cross-reference and have your capacity right there in your palm through technology.
Mayor Story, you talked about, and I want to just follow up on previous questions. You talked about obviously the transition of the local economy and the very urgent need to transition the local economy from forestry and mining to tourism. And having lived and worked in Alberta and traveled a lot in BC and the Okanagan and all the boating that happens there, I've seen that, and I haven't been to your part of the world, but I'm sure it's beautiful. What percentage of the economy currently in your region is tourism, and where would aspirationally you hope that to be?
Yeah, Northern BC isn't known for being the biggest tourism spot, so I don't actually have those numbers off the top of my head, but you're welcome to come and visit. But we are working on Northern BC tourism more and more and more. And, there's a port of Prince Rupert, and we're trying to get those cruise ships to come through the north a bit more. There's a lot of people that drive through here on their way to Alaska, so getting them to stop or even go for staycations from Prince George to stay in Fraser Lake, because a lot of people will actually stay at the Pomeroy in Prince George. We have no idea why. There's 2 water slides there. They will literally leave their house and go and do that. So that's happening, where people are looking for places to go where they don't have to travel as far. And when we talk about emissions, maybe that's a great thing. They're staying within, their region, and they're not driving, all the way to or flying to Hawaii. We want to keep them within the north too, or within our provinces. So that might be a good thing. But I don't have those numbers. Sorry, but there's a lot of traffic going through our communities because of the growth.
Right, and the Yellowhead Highway being right there. What is the plan? Like, what is the time horizon for the building of the hotels and the restaurants and et cetera?
Yeah, well, we were hoping to be ahead of the game before the sawmill, if it ever closed, did. And unfortunately, it closed in May, and then we had Canfor close in at the end of this year in December, which is about 50 other jobs, high-paying jobs in our region. So we lost 300 with the mine, and another couple hundred, I would say it was probably 300 with the sawmill over the last couple of years, and then another 50. So that's 650 high-paying jobs that have gone. So we need this as soon as possible. We need to move on things. But again, we're grant dependent. We have only 1,000 people that live in the community, and we can't tax them. We have $100 million infrastructure deficit. We can't tax them to death. Unfortunately, there's just not enough funding. Yeah.
Okay, 10 seconds. I'll give it back. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And Mr. Lausanne, you're up for 5 minutes here.
Merci. Mairesse Story.
Thank you. This is for the mayor. You mentioned raising awareness about the use of buoys. You've brought this up several times, so this is just a matter of interest. Are you supported by any organization on Fraser Lake that is working to raise awareness, or that's carrying out studies, or that's working with you or the municipality?
There's no one else. That there's just been concerns from local residents on both lakes that are close to me, and then we talk about this at the regional district, Bulkley and Chaco as well, about the safety of the lake. So there's no one really working on this that I know of. It's just become an awareness strategy to protect people.
Moi, je suis principalement au Québec, mais Plusieurs de mes...
I am mostly in Quebec, but many of my boating expeditions are in Ontario. I'm on a river that runs between Quebec and Ontario, and also on the Lac des Montagnes, northwest of Montreal. I can tell you that associations are doing extraordinary work in the municipalities I know. There are 41 municipalities in my riding. Several of them are supported by organizations or associations, boating or lake associations that are carrying out excellent work. Would it be a good idea to ask citizens or shoreline residents at Fraser Lake to gather together and create some sort of entity to support your work?
I truly do think that's a great idea. And I'm not going to say unfortunately, actually. I'm just going to say the capacity of volunteerism seems to have waned. And it seems to be the same 5 people that do everything in my community, and I'm one of them. So, I think it's a great idea. And if I can make that happen, I think I would. So, yeah, I like that idea. That's a great idea. I will host a meeting. I'll invite you to come too. There we go. Everybody, you're all invited.
I used to be a city councillor and I was involved in my community also. Je veux vous poser une question à Madame Renaud-Langevin.
I'd like to put a question to you, Ms. Renaud-Langevin. You're aware of intelligent boating? Yes. It's a program that you have joined, and you received federal funding, about $260,000 for this. And for the purposes of this committee, I'd like to ask, Lake Massawippi is a Canadian model in navigation, and your organization since 2017 is carrying out research. So please explain how investment in your organization helped. A summary in 1 minute. That investment allowed us to ensure that every user of the lake was made aware of ideal behaviors on the lake, whatever their craft. And this also allowed us to set in buoys, create an interactive map, and boaters were presented best practices for the lake. Thank you. There's an element of that answer that's important for my colleague Bernier-Neval, that the fact that, yes, federal funding allows for putting in buoys based on programming, that also allows municipalities to raise awareness, to evaluate shoreline health, evaluate bathymetry, and protect underwater ecology. In your organization, you emphasize the environment. I know that's your priority, but are you also concerned about, speed and human safety? We certainly are. One of the aims of our funding for intelligent navigation had to do with seeing how safe boaters felt. And I think that 35% of boaters didn't feel safe on the lake for a number of reasons. So, yes, we certainly covered that angle as well. So was it in this study or in other studies that you evaluated the zebra mussel invasion and its effect on your lake? Or was that another type of funding? Yes, it was another type of funding. We've been very lucky. These projects, though, are all linked. One can't ask for a second set of funding for the same project. You need to come up with new projects or address different angles of the issue for new funding. Can we say thank you to the Government of Canada? Yes, indeed. Thank you. You're welcome. It's official.
Okay. Mr. Marcelo Deval, for 3 minutes, because I was generous to Mr. Lausanne.
Merci, oui. En fait,
Thank you, indeed. So what could I add to that? I think that Mr. Nozo misunderstood me when I was mentioning that it was impossible to use the funding for buoys. I meant buoys that are linked to regulation. All that can be funded is, preventive buoys. Unfortunately, there's no funding to make it easier to post regulations, and that's a problem. So my question is, once again, for Blue Massawippi, I'm sure you're very happy to have received funding. I'm sure you would have liked to receive even more because I think the need is greater than what you've received funding for. But let's address a specific issue. Several witnesses have come to tell us that they're disappointed by the amount of time it takes to succeed at actually applying any regulation, to apply for the regulations and then get them and then apply them. So what's a reasonable amount of time between the outset of such an undertaking and the time when a regulation is actually applied? Is it 6 months, 2 years, 5 years? Of course, there are municipal elections that get in the way as well. So what makes sense, do you think, to keep citizens involved and not discourage volunteers trying to make a difference? I'll give you a response based on my work as a manager and HR and so on, and someone who's worked in this area with citizens. I think that ideally it should be 3 years. Longer is too long. 4 years is really, really a maximum. Everything can shift under your feet within 4 years. I think within 3 years is reasonable. No more, though. It doesn't really work in the municipalities, given what they're dealing with. Chair, how much time do I have left? 1 minute? Very well. Perhaps for you to wind up, if there were a single change to make your number one priority that we should address at Transport Canada in the regulations, I know that you've mentioned boating licenses. That's a good point you've underscored. But is there any other element that's a priority for you? I think the priority would truly be to provide municipalities with direct access, at least provide regional county municipalities direct access to an easier way to manage all this. We can work with municipalities, consultations and so on, but there are a number of things that we can't do. So I think the priority would really be to simplify even more the whole process and make it even easier and make it take even less time. Thank you.
Ms. Dance.
Perfect. Sorry, can you remind me how much time I have? 3?
Yeah, 3 minutes. My apologies.
Perfect. No, thank you very much. So I'm going to actually ask Mayor Story a little bit. I know she's talked about this resort that they're looking at building and really trying to increase tourism in their community and how important that is. I just want to, because we've talked and we've heard some of the concerns that some of the busier lakes and areas are having. And although the government has talked about all the funding, I know that there's not something available for all the lakes across our country. So I'd like you to maybe just talk a little bit about some of the environmental impacts that you're scared of that will come with this extra tourism, as well as some of the enforcement issues that you might have, like with the federal government, although it's supposed to be the federal government's responsibility, but that largely falls on local municipalities. What impact will that have on this, on the resort and such?
That is a really good question because there is a lakeshore, foreshore study that has been done saying that there is an issue with the shore. So that just came out. That was university students that were doing that. So we haven't even gotten into details with that whole study yet. And then enforcement and protecting the lake and speed regulations and who is going to manage these things. You know, these are constant questions, and capacity is always an issue. There's so many lakes in Canada. How do we manage all of these things? How do we work together for the common good and for strategies that are actually going to work? And, you know, while I think it's great to create jobs, you know, let's just say that means there's another RCMP officer that needs to be hired and trained, and there's a boat that needs to come. All of these things cost money. So, and capacity, you know, sometimes we just don't have the people, and we're already short RCMP officers in our area. So it does come down to long-term planning, you can't just turn around and say, yeah, this is what we're doing and it's all going to work out. You're going to have to, as a municipality, especially in our shoes, we're going to have to plan this out and make sure we're doing it the right way. And it's not going to impact the lake in a negative way. And that's why it's so important also that we work with the local First Nation communities that live on either side of the lake. We live in the middle, they're on either side. We need to make sure that they're happy and everyone is happy with it. We're not building a marina that is, for a city. We're building a marina that is small and hopefully we'll push for more local flavor in a way too. So we'll see how that goes. Thanks for the question.
Oh, that's great. And I wish you all the best. I hope it works out. And I hope that the Canadian government is able to come and support some of those things. If you could ask for one, pie in the sky, thing that could happen that
quickly,
would really...
we just got 10 seconds left here, so.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Well, thank you very much. Good luck.
Well, that will bring us to an end. So thank you very much to the witnesses and to the questioners. Excellent job by all. And I shall suspend because everyone's our end. When are we doing the proper word? Adjourn. Sorry, I'm a lawyer. I should know that.
I shall end.
Great job, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.